Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a bit more caffeinated. Imagine you're living in the 19th century, a time when doctors were prescribing all sorts of strange remedies for everything from stomach ailments to mental fog. But one thing that caught on in the medical world surprisingly was coffee. Yes, the very beverage we're all sipping on right now. It wasn't just a pick-me-up at breakfast or a late-night study fuel. It was considered a cure-all by many 19th century doctors. From treating headaches to helping with digestion, coffee had a strong hold in the medical field. And you probably won't survive the wild, over-the-top methods they use to administer it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're curious, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the world of 19th century medicine. Doctors in top hats and waistcoats, stethoscopes hanging from their necks, bustling about in their clinics, armed with all sorts of bizarre remedies for every ailment imaginable. But there was one tool that became a staple in their medical toolkit, and it wasn't some exotic herb or fancy potion. No, it was coffee. That very thing you're likely sipping while watching this video. To us, it's the thing we reach for when we need a little energy boost or to stay awake during a late night binge-watching session. But for 19th century doctors, coffee was much more than that. It was a versatile cure-all, prescribed for everything from digestion problems to mental clarity. Today, we can hardly imagine anyone writing a prescription for a cup of coffee. But back then, it wasn't just a morning beverage. It was seen as a medical miracle. Let's rewind a bit. The 19th century was an era of experimentation in medicine. This was long before the widespread use of modern pharmaceuticals, and doctors were scrambling to find remedies that worked whether they made sense or not. Amidst this trial and error landscape, coffee emerged as one of the favored solutions. It was thought to have a multitude of therapeutic benefits, and its popularity as a medical treatment soared during the century. But how did coffee, something so common today, come to be seen as a miracle cure? Well, it all started with the fact that coffee was a stimulant, a mild one, but still a stimulant. It was believed to energize the body, get the blood circulating, and clear the mind. If you were tired, stressed, or had a headache, coffee was often the go-to solution. But the list of ailments doctors believed coffee could cure grew well beyond just fatigue. Coffee became a jack of all trades in the world of 19th century medicine, serving as a treatment for conditions we would now laugh off with modern knowledge. Historians still argue whether coffee's use in medicine was driven by genuine belief in its efficacy, or whether it was simply the best option available at the time. What's clear, however, is that coffee had a remarkable cultural and medicinal significance. It wasn't just a drink, it was a remedy, a treatment that doctors thought could fix everything from digestion problems to emotional well-being. And when you think about it, this idea wasn't entirely unfounded. After all, the caffeine in coffee does have stimulating effects on the central nervous system. But in the 19th century, the practice was taken to extremes. So, what did 19th century doctors think coffee could do? Well, let's take a look at some of the wild ways it was used. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive into some of the specific ways 19th century doctors believed coffee could cure a whole host of ailments. The idea of using coffee as a remedy wasn't limited to a simple cup. In the morning, it became a solution for everything from digestion to pain relief. Imagine yourself in the 1800s, sitting across from your doctor as he prescribes you a few cups of strong, black coffee to cure whatever's bothering you. It might sound odd today, but at the time, it was a perfectly normal part of medical practice. So, let's take a look at how coffee made its way into the treatment of some common ailments. First up, let's talk about digestion. Coffee was often recommended to those suffering from stomach ailments, especially bloating, indigestion, and constipation. The idea was simple. Coffee, being a mild stimulant, would help stimulate digestion and get things moving in the digestive tract. If you were feeling sluggish after a big meal, doctors might prescribe coffee to kickstart the digestive process. It was thought that coffee's stimulating properties could promote the release of gastric juices, aiding in the breakdown of food. Some even claimed that it could help neutralize stomach acids, making it an ideal cure for heartburn or acid reflux. Can you imagine the relief of hearing that your doctor's cure for an upset stomach is just a cup of coffee? For many, that's exactly what they believed. There wasn't much emphasis on understanding the science behind it at the time. After all, we know now that coffee can increase acid production in the stomach and even exacerbate heartburn for some people. But back then, it was all about experimentation. For many patients, a cup of strong coffee after a meal was as effective as any modern-day antacid or digestive aid. But coffee's role in medicine didn't stop at digestion. It was also widely used to treat pain. Yes, pain. It might sound like a stretch, but doctors in the 19th century believed that coffee could help alleviate various types of discomfort. From headaches to muscle pain, coffee was considered a miracle worker. The idea was that caffeine, a stimulant, could reduce pain by stimulating the central nervous system and increasing circulation. For those suffering from migraines, a cup of coffee was often prescribed in the hope that it would relieve the throbbing, pulsing sensation in the head. It was often combined with other medications, such as opium or laudanum, to enhance its effects. The use of coffee as a painkiller was particularly popular among people suffering from chronic pain or fatigue. For them, coffee was a way to stay alert and active, giving them a sense of relief from the physical discomfort they were experiencing. Imagine being stuck in a constant state of pain and fatigue, and having your doctor suggest that all you needed was a cup of coffee to feel better. In a way, coffee was a shortcut to feeling human again. And who could blame them for thinking it worked? Coffee, after all, did help keep people awake and alert. It gave them a temporary burst of energy, which could mask the underlying pain, even if it didn't necessarily solve the problem. Historians still argue whether coffee's use in pain relief was truly effective or if it was just a placebo. Some researchers believe that the caffeine in coffee can indeed have a mild analgesic effect, providing temporary relief from pain, while others suggest that it was simply a psychological crutch. People believed it works, so it did. What's interesting is that the caffeine in coffee wasn't the only thing doctors had in mind. The act of drinking something warm and soothing likely played a part in the placebo effect as well. Regardless of how effective it was, coffee's use as a painkiller became deeply ingrained in medical practice during the 19th century. But coffee wasn't just for physical ailments. It was also used as a remedy for mental fatigue and emotional distress. Doctors in the 19th century believed that coffee had a direct impact on mental clarity, helping to clear the fog and bring focus to the mind. This was especially true for individuals suffering from exhaustion or mental burnout. At a time when the concept of mental health wasn't well understood, coffee became a go-to solution for people who were mentally drained or struggling with focus. The idea was that coffee's stimulating properties could revitalize the mind, making it easier to concentrate and think clearly. It's almost laughable to think that doctors once prescribed coffee to alleviate stress and mental fatigue. Given how much we now know about the stimulating effects of caffeine on the nervous system, today we're well aware that too much coffee can lead to jitteriness, anxiety, and even insomnia. But back then, a steaming cup of coffee was thought to provide just the right amount of mental clarity to help people power through their day. For people who were struggling with mental exhaustion, coffee was often a quick fix that helped them stay alert and focused. It was as if coffee was a temporary mental reset button. Press it, and you were ready to take on the world again. Historians still debate whether coffee's role in mental clarity was genuinely effective or simply a social trend. Some argue that its stimulant properties could have improved alertness and attention, especially in individuals who were overworked or underrested. Others believe that the mental boost coffee provided was largely psychological, driven by the belief that the drink was a cure-all for fatigue. Regardless, the fact remains that coffee played a significant role in 19th century medicine as a quick fix for those seeking to regain mental energy and clarity. So, how did coffee get this reputation as a cure-all for such a wide range of ailments? Well, part of it had to do with the limited understanding of medical science at the time. With few effective treatments available, doctors were often forced to experiment with what was readily available, and coffee, a widely consumed substance, became one of their go-to remedies. It's important to remember that medicine in the 19th century was still in its infancy, with many of the modern techniques and medications we rely on today still years away from discovery. In this environment, coffee was viewed as a natural, easily accessible solution to a variety of health problems. So, as you sip your coffee today, remember that you're not just enjoying a caffeinated pick-me-up, You're purely participating in a long history of coffee as a medicinal marvel. While we may not be using it to treat migraines or mental exhaustion anymore, the fact that coffee was once hailed as a universal cure speaks to its enduring cultural significance. It's not just a beverage, it's a part of our shared history, a symbol of our attempts to understand and alleviate the everyday struggles of life. Now that we've explored the widespread use of coffee for ailments like digestion, pain relief, and mental clarity, let's take a deeper look at how coffee became intertwined with the treatment of insomnias. Yes, the irony isn't lost on us. 19th century doctors often prescribed coffee to help patients sleep better. If you're like most of us, the thought of drinking coffee before bed sounds like a recipe for a sleepless night. But back then, coffee was considered a remedy for insomnia, particularly among those who were suffering from what was known as nervous exhaustion or nervous disorders. Imagine you've had a long, stressful day. Your mind is racing. You're exhausted. But when your head hits a pillow, sleep just won't come. Enter the doctor's prescription, coffee. The reasoning behind this was grounded in the belief that coffee could help calm the nervous system. Despite being a stimulant, in theory, coffee, as a warm drink, would relax the mind and provide a sense of comfort, allowing the person to sleep soundly. How, you ask? Well, the warmth of the coffee was thought to have a calming effect, much like a warm cup of tea might be used today to unwind before bed. At the time, doctors believed that the physical and mental fatigue of their patients, whether caused by work, emotional strain, or just the stress of life, was often the result of a nervous system that was too revved up. The solution, they thought, was to balance out this nervous energy with a jolt of caffeine. While we know today that caffeine actually stimulates the nervous system and makes it more difficult to fall asleep, 19th century doctors didn't quite have the full understanding of how the body reacts to stimulants. Instead, they thought the temporary boost of energy from coffee would allow the body to release the built-up tension, leading to a peaceful night of sleep. It's ironic, really, considering that coffee today is one of the last things most people would want to consume before going to bed. Historians still argue about whether the use of coffee to treat insomnia had any real benefits, or if it was simply a psychological effect. Some believe that the warm drink, in conjunction with its mild stimulant properties, helped calm the patient enough to relax and sleep. Others think it was more of a placebo, a treatment that worked simply because the patient believed it would. It's also possible that, at the time, coffee's calming effect was linked to the culture of self-care and relaxation rituals that people believed would promote better sleep. Whatever the case, this practice of using coffee to treat insomnia is another fascinating example of how 19th century doctors relied on what was available to them, and how cultural beliefs about health shaped their medical practices. But let's take a moment to think about how this idea of coffee as a sleep aid fits into the broader historical context. The late 19th century was a time when scientific understanding of the human body was still developing. Modern psychology and neurology were still in their infancy, and much of what doctors believed about mental and physical health was based on theories that didn't have much scientific evidence to back them up. Instead, treatments were often based on observation, cultural norms, and the trial and error methods of the time. Coffee, being widely available and thought to have numerous benefits, was naturally incorporated into medical treatments, even if it didn't always have the desired effects. As the centuries went on and medicine advanced, doctors began to understand more about how stimulants like caffeine affect the body. It became clear that drinking coffee before bed could indeed disrupt sleep rather than promote it. Today, we know that caffeine is a powerful central nervous system stimulant that can stay in the body for hours, making it difficult to fall asleep if consumed too late in the day. But in the 19th century, this was still a mystery, and so coffee remained a go-to solution for insomnia. Imagine being prescribed something that's now widely known to keep you awake. You'd probably find it strange, but for the people of that era, it was just part of the medical landscape. Still, there's a certain charm in how these doctors try to make sense of the world with the limited resources and knowledge they had. They weren't completely off track. After all, warm liquids and comforting rituals can indeed promote relaxation, even if the stimulant properties of coffee would later be understood to work against the intended effect. It's a testament to how much medicine and our understanding of the human body has evolved over time. Historians also like to argue about whether the use of coffee in this way was simply a quirk of the 19th century or if it reflected a larger cultural obsession with coffee itself. Coffee was seen as something of a wonder drug, and its use in treating insomnia only added to its mystique. In an age where many diseases and conditions had little known cure, coffee stood out as a universal remedy. It wasn't just for the poor or for the rich. It was something everyone could access, and everyone seemed to have a reason to drink it. Whether it was for mental clarity, to ease digestive issues, or to promote better sleep, coffee became a staple in the medicinal cabinets of homes across the world. In some ways, it was the 19th century equivalent of a magic elixir, a drink that could solve many of life's problems, from fatigue to stomach troubles, all wrapped up in a humble cup. As you reflect on this historical coffee craze, it's interesting to think about how cultural beliefs and practices shaped medicine in ways that we might now see as bizarre or even humorous. The connection between coffee and insomnia, the belief that this caffeinated beverage could cure sleep troubles, seems outlandish by today's standards. But in the context of the 19th century, it was just another example of doctors making do with the limited knowledge they had and attempting to help their patients with what they believed was the best treatment. As we continue exploring the 19th century coffee craze in medicine, let's take a look at one of the most surprising and, frankly, eyebrow-raising uses of coffee. As a weight loss aid. You read that right. In the 1800s, coffee wasn't just a morning pick-me-up. It was also touted as a solution for controlling appetite and promoting weight loss. The idea was that coffee, with its stimulating properties, could suppress the appetite and prevent overeating. Imagine being told to drink coffee not just to wake up, but to keep your waistline in check. Back in the 19th century, the modern understanding of metabolism, hunger cues, and body weight was still in its infancy. Today, we know that a combination of lifestyle factors, diet, exercise, genetics, and more affect body weight. But in the 1800s, people were still experimenting with what they thought might help with obesity or weight management. And coffee, with its well-known stimulating effects on the central nervous system, became an unlikely candidate. Doctors and weight loss experts of the time believed that coffee could suppress the appetite by stimulating the stomach, helping people feel full and less likely to snack or overeat. The way it was supposed to work was simple. The caffeine in coffee was believed to have a toning effect on the stomach, allowing people to feel satisfied after smaller portions. Of course, there was no scientific evidence to back up this claim, and it didn't take long for doctors to realize that while coffee might give you a temporary burst of energy, it wasn't going to magically shrink your waistline. Still, that didn't stop the coffee craze from growing. What's especially interesting is that coffee was often prescribed alongside other dietary measures or treatments. For example, people who were trying to lose weight were sometimes told to drink coffee throughout the day and cut back on their meals. Sometimes, this advice was given alongside other practices like fasting or using certain herbal concoctions that were believed to cleanse the body. It was all part of the larger movement in the 19th century toward controlling one's body and health through rigid dietary rules and the belief in quick fixes. Historians still debate whether the widespread belief that coffee could help with weight loss was grounded in any sort of scientific understanding of the body, or whether it was simply the result of coffee's popularity. It's likely that the latter played a larger role. Coffee had already become a household staple by the time this weight loss trend began, and so it made sense that it would be marketed as a cure for various ailments, including obesity. What's more, the idea of using a simple, everyday beverage like coffee to help manage weight must have seemed appealing to people who were looking for an easy solution. But even without solid evidence, the idea persisted. In fact, the link between coffee and weight loss became so ingrained in society that it even influenced the development of later weight loss fads and products. Coffee was eventually marketed in the 20th century as part of diet plans and even incorporated into diet pills that promised to speed up metabolism and burn fat. It was the start of a long history of using coffee as a slimming tool, even if the health benefits were largely overstated. Of course, we now know that drinking coffee alone isn't going to help you lose weight. In fact, excessive consumption of caffeine can actually have the opposite effect, leading to jitteriness, increased hunger, and even digestive issues. But back in the 1800s, when doctors and diet experts were still figuring out how the body worked, the idea of using coffee to curb appetite seemed like a plausible and easy fix. What's particularly funny about this is that we're still living with the remnants of this coffee and weight loss connection. In the modern world, there are still coffee-based diets and weight loss products on the market. Despite the lack of scientific support, the idea that coffee can somehow magically shrink your waistline persists in popular culture, even though we've learned a great deal more about how our bodies process food, caffeine, and metabolism. In a way, the 19th century weight loss craze surrounding coffee speaks to something deeper, that constant human desire for quick fixes. The 1800s were an era where people were eager to find simple solutions to complex problems, and coffee, as an affordable and widely available resource, seemed like an easy answer to the growing concerns about body image and weight. Today, we're more aware of the complexities of body weight and the importance of a balanced approach to health. But the idea of using coffee to curb appetite was part of a larger cultural trend of seeking easy answers to health issues. The real question remains, did people truly benefit from this coffee and weight loss trend? Or was it all just another placebo? Some historians argue that the belief in coffee's slimming powers was largely psychological. People who drank coffee while attempting to lose weight might have convinced themselves that the beverage was helping them, reinforcing the idea that it worked. Others believe that the mild diuretic effect of coffee could have led to temporary weight loss through water loss, which may have made people feel lighter for a time. But the truth is that coffee wasn't a miracle weight loss solution. It was just a drink with stimulating effects, and its benefits were largely overstated. Still, coffee's role in the world of weight loss and dieting continued into the 20th century. Today, coffee remains a key part of many weight loss supplements, though its true effects on metabolism are still debated. For now, we know that coffee isn't a magic bullet for weight loss, but that hasn't stopped the cultural connection between coffee and dieting from persisting. Even now, many people still associate coffee with energy, focus, and even slimming, and we continue to see new coffee-based health fads pop up every few years. So, next time you reach for a cup of coffee, remember that its history goes beyond just being a morning pick-me-up. At one point, it was considered a tool for weight loss, pain relief, and even mental clarity, though it probably didn't do much for any of those things. The enduring popularity of coffee as a health and wellness product speaks to our desire to find simple solutions to complex problems. And while we've come a long way since the 19th century, it's clear that coffee's place in both medical history and modern culture is anything but simple. Having explored the curious use of coffee in weight loss, let's now take a look at one of the more unexpected and, shall we say, unusual uses of coffee in the 19th century. Its role as a treatment for mental health issues. Yes, that's right, coffee, the very stimulant known to keep us alert, was once prescribed to treat conditions like depression, anxiety, and what was then called melancholia. Imagine being told that a cup of coffee could fix your emotional troubles. Today, the idea sounds a bit comical, but back then, coffee was seen as a quick fix for the weary, anxious, and downhearted. The 19th century was an era when medical understanding of mental health was still in its infancy. Terms like depression and anxiety weren't commonly used the way they are today, and conditions like these were often categorized as nervous disorders or melancholia. Doctors, lacking the knowledge we have now, were often searching for ways to treat these elusive ailments, and coffee, with its stimulating properties, became a go-to treatment. The thinking behind this was simple. If coffee could stimulate the nervous system and energize the body, it might help people feel more alert, less sad, and more engaged with life. For those suffering from what we now know as depression, the recommendation to drink coffee was based on the idea that it could lift their spirits. Coffee, being a stimulant, was thought to help clear the mind and break through the fog of melancholy. If you were feeling down or emotionally drained, the hope was that coffee would snap you out of it, almost like a jolt of energy for your mental state. While this may sound like an outdated, oversimplified approach to treating depression, back in the day, it was viewed as an effective and perhaps even trendy treatment. In addition to its supposed ability to improve mood, coffee was also used to treat what we now recognize as anxiety. The idea was that by stimulating the central nervous system, coffee would energize the body and mind, helping people feel less sluggish and more capable of managing stress. People suffering from nervous exhaustion, anxiety, or fatigue were often prescribed coffee as a way to help them regain their energy and mental sharpness. This use of coffee as a pick-me-up for anxiety wasn't limited to the common folk. In fact, wealthy aristocrats and even royalty were known to rely on coffee to alleviate their stress and maintain their composure. But as with many other uses of coffee in 19th century medicine, the effects of coffee on mental health were largely speculative. Today, we know that caffeine can indeed temporarily improve mood by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain, which helps keep us awake and alert. However, we also know that caffeine can have the opposite effect if consumed in large quantities or too late in the day, leading to increased anxiety and even insomnia. The 19th century belief that coffee could relieve mental distress may have been based on the drink's ability to provide a temporary boost in alertness, but it was, at best, a short-term solution to much deeper psychological issues. Historians still debate how much coffee actually helped with mental health problems during the 19th century. Some argue that it likely had more of a placebo effect. Patients believed that coffee would help them feel better, so it did. Others suggest that the stimulating properties of coffee could have had a temporary mood-lifting effect, particularly for people who were physically exhausted or dealing with fatigue. However, the treatment was far from a long-term solution. Coffee didn't address the underlying causes of depression or anxiety, nor did it offer any therapeutic benefits that would stand up to modern scrutiny. What's fascinating is that, despite its lack of scientific backing, coffee's reputation as a mental health remedy persisted well into the 20th century. Coffee's connection to emotional well-being remained a cultural mainstay, even as modern psychology and psychiatry advanced. Today, we understand that mental health is a complex issue, often requiring more than just a cup of coffee to solve. But in the 19th century, with so little understanding of mental illness and few available treatments, coffee seemed like an easy and readily available solution. While we no longer rely on coffee as a cure for depression or anxiety, it's still seen as a mood enhancer for many people. How many times have you heard someone say, "I just need my morning coffee to start the day right"? For many, coffee remains a way to boost mood and mental alertness, especially in the morning when energy levels are low. But unlike in the 19th century, we now know that it's not a magic cure-all for mental health issues. Instead, it's a helpful tool for staying awake and focused. In fact, coffee's role in mental health and mood regulation has been the subject of much debate in recent years. While moderate coffee consumption has been linked to improved mood and cognitive function, excessive caffeine intake has been associated with increased anxiety and jitteriness. For some people, too much coffee can exacerbate feelings of stress, while for others, it provides just the right amount of stimulation to power through the day. What's interesting, though, is that coffee's enduring place in our culture as a symbol of alertness and productivity ties back to its 19th century roots. Even though we no longer see it as a cure for depression or anxiety, coffee continues to be a go-to remedy for fatigue and mental fog. Its connection to mental sharpness is so ingrained in our daily lives that it's hard to imagine a world without it. As you sip your coffee tomorrow morning, take a moment to think about how far this humble beverage has come. From its early days as a miracle cure for everything from headaches to mental health, coffee has remained an essential part of human life for centuries. While modern science has advanced far beyond 19th century medicine, coffee still holds a special place in our hearts and our mugs. Having seen how coffee became a go-to remedy for mental health, pain relief, and weight loss, let's now take a look at how this caffeine-filled miracle drink was also used in one of the most important and intense moments in life, childbirth. Yes, you read that correctly. Coffee, the same stimulant that we rely on today to stay awake during meetings, was once prescribed to ease the pains of labor. In the 19th century, doctors truly believed coffee could play a significant role in childbirth, even though we now know it was far from the best option. Picture it. You're a woman in labor, surrounded by your family, with no epidurals or modern pain relief in sight. Now, imagine your doctor telling you that the answer to your pain might be a strong, hot cup of coffee. The idea at the time was that coffee's stimulating properties could help both physically and mentally during labor. It was believed to help with fatigue, increase alertness, and perhaps most importantly, give women a boost of energy when they needed it most. It was also thought that the warmth of the coffee would provide the comfort and help soothe the aches and pains associated with the intense physical demands of childbirth. What's fascinating about this belief is the context of 19th century medicine. At the time, doctors were constantly experimenting with what they had at their disposal. with no modern anesthesia options. Doctors had to rely on whatever remedies they could find to help ease the pain of childbirth. Women in labor had very few options other than drinking comforting warm liquids or taking opium-based medicines, which, by the way, could have serious side effects. So, coffee, in all its caffeinated glory, found itself entering the delivery room as a solution. The reasoning behind this was based on coffee's effects on the nervous system. Coffee, with its stimulating properties, was thought to provide a jolt of energy that could help women power through the exhausting process of childbirth. It was thought to fight off fatigue and keep women more alert during labor, in a time when women had to endure painful contractions without the help of modern painkillers. The idea of using coffee as a pick-me-up during childbirth was, in a way, an attempt to give them some control over the process and keep them mentally engaged. However, the practice didn't come without its risks. While coffee may have helped some women feel more energized during labor, it was still a stimulant, and for women who were already under immense physical stress, the effects of caffeine could be unpredictable. In some cases, too much caffeine could lead to restlessness, anxiety, or even increased heart rate, all things that weren't ideal for someone in the midst of childbirth. Yet, the practice persisted, partly because coffee was easy to obtain and widely believed to have the power to restore energy. What's particularly interesting about this practice is that it reflects the 19th century approach to medicine in general, experimentation with what was available, even when it wasn't entirely scientifically grounded. The connection between coffee and childbirth might seem bizarre today, but in an era where modern obstetrics and anesthesia were far from reality, doctors turned to what they thought might help, and coffee, as a widely accessible and seemingly effective stimulant, was an obvious choice. Historians still debate whether coffee had any real impact on labor, or whether it was simply a placebo, a comforting drink that made women feel better and more in control of the situation. Some researchers argue that the effects of caffeine in this context were purely psychological, with women believing that coffee would help them power through labor. Others suggest that while coffee may have given a temporary burst of energy, it was far from a long-term solution for pain management during childbirth. In any case, the idea that coffee could ease the physical pain of labor was eventually replaced by more advanced methods of pain relief as the field of obstetrics evolved. The development of anesthesia, particularly the use of ether and later chloroform in the mid-19th century, revolutionized childbirth and rendered coffee's role in the delivery room obsolete. Women were now able to undergo childbirth without the same level of physical suffering, and coffee was no longer seen as an essential part of the process. Still, the notion of coffee as a comforting and energizing drink during labor speaks to the broader role that coffee played in 19th century society. It wasn't just a drink. You had to wake up in the morning. It was a cure-all, a remedy, and even a form of solace in some of life's most difficult moments. And in the context of childbirth, coffee was just one more example of how it was thought to play a therapeutic role in daily life. Today, we understand that childbirth is a far more complex process that requires careful medical management. But the historical use of coffee in this context highlights the creative and sometimes misguided ways in which doctors and society at large try to ease the pain of life's most significant experiences. While modern medicine has evolved far beyond the use of coffee in labor, it's worth remembering that these practices were born out of a desire to help, even if they didn't always hit the mark. And so, as you sip your coffee today, think back to those 19th century women who were served coffee in an attempt to ease the pain of one of the most intense physical experiences in life. While we no longer rely on coffee as a remedy for childbirth, it's interesting to think about how this seemingly simple beverage became intertwined with such profound moments in history. Now that we've explored coffee's surprising role in childbirth, let's move on to another curious use: its role in treating headaches and migraines. You might be wondering how something as stimulating as coffee could be used to alleviate a condition that often involves throbbing, debilitating pain. Well, in the 19th century, coffee was indeed a common remedy for headache sufferers. Doctors believed that the caffeine in coffee could help constrict blood vessels, providing relief from the pulsing pain that often accompanies headaches and migraines. The use of coffee as a pain reliever seemed to make sense at the time, as caffeine was known to have certain physiological effects on the body. For people suffering from frequent headaches, coffee was considered an easy, accessible solution. If you were plagued by a migraine or a tension headache, a strong cup of coffee might have been one of the first treatments suggested by your doctor. The reasoning was simple. Caffeine could have a vasoconstrictive effect, meaning it would tighten the blood vessels and reduce the swelling or pressure that was believed to be the cause of the headache. Since caffeine stimulates the central nervous system, it was also thought to help elevate the mood and energy levels of someone suffering from pain, providing them with much needed relief from the physical and mental toll of a headache. The irony here is that today, we know that caffeine can actually trigger headaches for some people, particularly those who are sensitive to it or who consume too much on a regular basis. In fact, the caffeine withdrawal headache is a well-known phenomenon among habitual coffee drinkers. But in the 19th century, doctors had no such knowledge. Instead, they believed coffee was a cure for headaches, and it became one of the most commonly recommended treatments. This practice wasn't just for the occasional headache either. Some doctors prescribed coffee for people who suffered from chronic migraines, believing it could provide long-term relief. The practice of using coffee for headaches became so widespread that it wasn't just doctors who were recommending it. Coffee, as a remedy for pain, found its way into popular culture, and people started self-prescribing coffee as a cure for their headaches. After all, it was easy to obtain, relatively inexpensive, and didn't require a prescription. And for those who weren't drinking it for its flavor, it was seen as a kind of medicine, a daily dose of relief that could prevent or relieve headaches. Historians still debate the effectiveness of coffee for treating headaches during the 19th century. Some argue that, in certain cases, coffee could have helped, particularly for tension headaches caused by stress or fatigue. The caffeine in coffee might have temporarily relieved pain and made people feel more alert, even if it wasn't solving the root cause of their headaches. Others believe that the coffee treatment was more of a placebo effect. People believed it worked, so it did. It's likely that both factors played a role. Regardless of the effectiveness, the widespread belief that coffee could relieve headaches persisted for much of the 19th century. Of course, we now know that caffeine isn't always the answer when it comes to migraines and headaches. In fact, for some people, excessive caffeine consumption can trigger or worsen migraines. Today, doctors take a much more nuanced approach to treating headaches, using medications that target the underlying causes of pain, whether that's inflammation, blood vessel dilation, or other factors. But in the 19th century, coffee seemed like a quick and simple remedy for a problem that many people faced on a regular basis. Interestingly, coffee's use for headaches wasn't limited to just the beverage itself. During the 19th century, some doctors recommended coffee in other forms, such as coffee-based poultices or topical applications. People would sometimes soak cloths in coffee and apply them to the forehead or temples to relieve headache pain. The idea was that the warmth and caffeine from the coffee would penetrate the skin and provide soothing relief. This method, while certainly unusual by today's standards, was just another example of the creativity or desperation with which 19th century doctors approached medical treatment. Looking at this now, it's fascinating how medical practices evolve over time. In the 19th century, coffee was seen as a cure-all for a variety of conditions, from headaches to digestive problems to mental fatigue. And while we now know that caffeine can have complex effects on the body, the historical use of coffee in medicine speaks to the broader context of how medicine evolved. It wasn't that doctors of the time were being malicious or irresponsible. They were simply doing the best they could with the knowledge and resources they had at their disposal. But as with many of the medical practices of the 19th century, coffee's role as a treatment for headaches eventually faded as medical science advanced. New research and understanding led to better treatments for headache relief, from prescription medications to over-the-counter painkillers. Today, we no longer rely on coffee as a first-line treatment for migraines or tension headaches, but the historical use of coffee for pain relief still provides a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of medicine. For those of us who still reach for a cup of coffee when we're feeling sluggish or need to fight off a headache, it's interesting to think about how coffee's medicinal uses have changed over the centuries. Once a miracle cure for everything from stomach troubles to headaches, coffee now serves as more of a pick-me-up or social ritual. Yet, its historical legacy as a go-to remedy is still very much a part of our modern-day coffee culture. So, next time you drink your morning cup of coffee, think back to the days when coffee was seen as much more than a caffeine fix. It was once a remedy for your aches, your mind, and even your emotional well-being. While coffee may not be the magic medicine it once was, it still carries with it a long history of being both a stimulant and a solution for various ailments. And while we now know that coffee is far from a one-size-fits-all remedy, it's clear that its impact on history and medicine will continue to linger in our cups. As we move forward, let's look at another area where coffee's impact on 19th century medicine was, shall we say, a bit more extreme. Coffee's role in the treatment of fatigue and mental exhaustion in an era where the pressures of industrialization were ramping up. Doctors turned to coffee as a solution for overworked, mentally drained individuals. In a world that wasn't quite yet on the brink of the 20th century technological revolution, people were still grappling with the long hours of manual labor, the stresses of modern life, and the development of large-scale industries. So, in an attempt to keep up with this increasing pace of life, coffee became a cure for the tired, the worn out, and the mentally burnt out. If you were struggling with exhaustion, be it physical or mental, you could expect to hear one simple prescription: coffee. At the time, the concept of mental exhaustion or nervous fatigue was becoming increasingly recognized as a legitimate ailment. Doctors were starting to understand that the brain needed rest, and that mental fatigue could affect both physical health and overall well-being. But instead of recommending rest or relaxation, something we would likely suggest today, many 19th century doctors thought that coffee, with its stimulating properties, would do the trick. Coffee was thought to revive the nervous system, providing the necessary jolt to keep individuals going when their minds and bodies were physically drained. Imagine being in the middle of a long workday in an industrial factory, or spending countless hours at your desk as a clerk. You're drained, you're struggling to focus, and the weight of the work is weighing down on your mind. Your doctor might prescribe a dose of coffee to combat mental exhaustion. The idea was that caffeine's stimulating effects would wake up the mind and body, restoring mental clarity and focus. And for the most part, it worked for a while. The problem was, once the effects of the caffeine wore off, you were right back where you started, tired and fatigued. Interestingly, coffee was often given to individuals who were struggling with what we might now call burnout. This was especially common among professionals who had to deal with long hours of concentration and intellectual work. The advice back then was simple: keep drinking coffee until you can push through your exhaustion. And in a time when mental health and the long-term effects of exhaustion weren't well understood, coffee seemed like the only answer. Historians still debate whether this widespread use of coffee as a solution to fatigue was truly effective or simply a psychological crutch. Some argue that the caffeine in coffee does, in fact, provide a temporary boost in alertness, which would help people push through their fatigue. However, others suggest that it was nothing more than a placebo. People were so convinced that coffee was the answer that they convinced themselves it worked. The reality is that while coffee might give you a temporary jolt of energy, it doesn't actually address the underlying causes of fatigue, whether physical or mental. In fact, doctors of the 19th century didn't fully understand the dangers of over-relying on stimulants like caffeine. Many people who drank coffee regularly would experience crashes after the effects wore off, leading them to drink more coffee to stay awake and alert. This cyclical dependence on coffee could result in jitteriness, anxiety, and even more severe mental and physical fatigue. But at the time, coffee was seen as a necessary part of life, something that could keep people going when they felt like they couldn't take another step. The irony, of course, is that while coffee was a solution to mental exhaustion, it didn't address the root cause of the problem: overwork and the increasing pace of life. In today's world, we know that rest, relaxation, and a balanced lifestyle are key to managing mental fatigue. But in the 19th century, with few options for stress management or understanding of mental health, coffee became the go-to remedy for people who were physically and mentally drained. And while modern medicine has since moved on from these antiquated approaches, the cultural impact of coffee as a symbol of productivity and energy remains strong today. Think about it. In modern society, coffee is still one of the first things we reach for when we feel tired or need a mental boost. Whether we're studying for an exam, working late at the office, or simply trying to power through a busy day, coffee remains a symbol of getting things done, of pushing through exhaustion. The difference now is that we understand coffee's limits. We know that it can help us feel more alert in the short term, but it's not a cure for chronic fatigue or burnout. Interestingly, coffee's role in managing mental exhaustion has evolved in ways that reflect broader societal changes. In the 19th century, it was viewed as a remedy for an era of hard physical labor and intellectual fatigue. But in today's world, where many people experience digital burnout or stress from the constant demands of modern life, coffee is still used as a crutch. However, the conversation around mental health has shifted. We now recognize that true mental and physical recovery comes from taking breaks, getting enough sleep, and finding ways to manage stress, something 19th century doctors didn't fully understand. As you sip your morning cup of coffee, take a moment to appreciate how far we've come since the 19th century. Coffee's enduring legacy in both medical history and modern-day life speaks to its cultural significance. While we no longer rely on it as a cure-all for fatigue or mental exhaustion, coffee still plays a central role in many people's daily routines. It's a reminder of how far we've come in understanding the balance between energy and rest, and how coffee has managed to stick around as a comforting, familiar solution for those early morning wake-ups. Now that we've covered coffee's many roles in pain management, weight loss, mental fatigue, and even childbirth, let's delve into another peculiar aspect of 19th century coffee use: its place in the realm of cleanliness and detoxing. Yes, you read that right. Coffee was actually considered part of a regimen to cleanse the body, a concept we might find odd today. The idea of using coffee for detoxification and bodily purification might seem outlandish, but it was taken seriously during the 1800s, often as a way to refresh the body, eliminate toxins, and rejuvenate the system. In the 19th century, the understanding of toxins in the body wasn't quite as developed as it is now. People didn't have the modern vocabulary to describe what we now know as metabolic waste, excess fat, or even things like heavy metals. Instead, there was this widespread belief that the body needed to be periodically cleansed or purged to maintain good health. Coffee was seen as a natural, accessible remedy to help with this process. The idea was that coffee's stimulating effects on the digestive system would help flush out unwanted substances, much like a cleansing fast or herbal tea would be used for the same purpose today. Doctors in the 19th century often recommended that patients drink coffee as a way to clear out their systems. Coffee's diuretic properties, which increase urination and promote the elimination of water, were considered beneficial for flushing out waste. This notion was similar to how we think about cleansing diets or detox teas today, though. Of course, without the scientific backing we now have. By consuming coffee, individuals were thought to be actively expelling toxins from their bodies, allowing for a cleaner, healthier system. After all, coffee is a diuretic, right? So the belief was that it would help the body flush out the bad stuff. But this idea of using coffee to detox doesn't end with simply drinking it. In some circles, coffee enemas became a part of the health regimens. Yes, coffee, not just as a beverage, but as an enema, was believed to promote cleansing by stimulating the liver and gallbladder to eliminate toxins. Now, you might be thinking, did people really do that? And the answer is, yes, they did. Medical practitioners of the time actually believed that introducing coffee directly into the colon could encourage detoxification and improve digestion. The practice was based on the theory that the liver would be stimulated to work harder at clearing out toxins, and it was even thought to help with everything from liver problems to constipation. Historians still argue about how widely coffee enemas were actually used in the 19th century. Some suggest that the practice was more of a fringe remedy, popular among certain alternative medicine circles. Others argue that it was a common and widely accepted practice, especially in more holistic or naturopathic communities. It's also interesting to note that coffee enemas weren't just used for physical ailments. They were sometimes thought to have psychological benefits too. People who were feeling run down, depressed, or mentally fatigued were sometimes prescribed this extreme coffee regimen to recharge their systems. Of course, by today's standards, we know that coffee enemas are not only ineffective, but potentially dangerous. Modern science has shown that coffee doesn't have the cleansing or detoxifying effects that 19th century doctors believed it did, and using it as an enema could cause harm by irritating the colon or leading to imbalances in the body. But at the time, coffee was one of the few widely available substances that could be used in this way, and it was thought to offer a variety of health benefits, real or imagined. Still, the use of coffee in the 19th century as a detoxifier points to a broader trend of medical experimentation and the desire to understand and control the body's internal systems. People were constantly looking for ways to purify themselves, whether through dietary changes, herbal remedies, or more extreme measures like coffee enemas. And although we may look back on these methods with a mixture of disbelief and amusement, they reflect the human drive to seek out solutions, even if those solutions weren't entirely grounded in scientific understanding. Interestingly, coffee's association with cleansing didn't entirely vanish after the 19th century. The idea that coffee can somehow purify the body has persisted in some circles, particularly in the realm of detox diets and wellness fads. While modern science has debunked the notion that coffee can cleanse or detox the body in any meaningful way, coffee remains a central part of many popular detox programs. Whether it's in the form of detox teas, coffee scrubs, or even coffee detox supplements, people still seek out coffee as a way to cleanse themselves from the inside out. As we sip our morning cup of coffee today, it's fascinating to think about how this beverage has been used in so many ways throughout history, from being a cure-all for every physical ailment to now being tied to modern-day wellness trends. While we now know that coffee isn't the magical detox elixir that 19th century doctors believed it to be, its continued presence in our lives as a source of comfort, energy, and even purported cleansing still connects us to centuries of history. What's perhaps the most amusing aspect of this history is that, even though we know so much more about how the body works and the role of substances like caffeine in our systems, coffee still holds a place of reverence in both the medical and wellness worlds. It's a reminder that no matter how much we learn, some ideas about health and wellness stick around, even when they've been thoroughly debunked. So, the next time you grab your coffee, whether it's for a much-needed energy boost or just a comforting ritual, remember that coffee once had a far more serious role to play in medicine. It wasn't just a drink for the morning. It was believed to be a solution for everything from headaches to detoxification, a miracle in a cup that was at the center of 19th century health practices. And while we know better today, the enduring popularity of coffee, both as a beverage and a wellness trend, speaks to its lasting legacy in human culture. As we continue to delve deeper into the fascinating, albeit sometimes bizarre, world of 19th century medicine and coffee, it's time to explore how coffee was used in more mundane, yet equally curious ways. Coffee, with all its medicinal possibilities, wasn't just restricted to the serious treatments we've already covered. It also found its place in the everyday lives of people, not just as a remedy for ailments, but as a part of daily wellness rituals. Imagine the scene. It's the 1800s, and your doctor prescribes coffee, not because you're ill, but because you need a little help getting through your daily routine. In the 19th century, coffee was an essential part of society, much like it is today. But back then, its use extended beyond the simple pleasure of a hot cup to help wake up in the morning. Doctors didn't just prescribe coffee to cure headaches or insomnia. They believed that it had a broader, more preventive role. Coffee was thought to be a tonic for overall health, a drink that could bolster your energy, stimulate your digestion, and, most importantly, keep you mentally sharp throughout the day. For the hard-working professionals of the time, doctors, lawyers, business people, coffee became a staple of daily life. A dose of caffeine in the morning was believed to be essential for maintaining productivity and focus throughout the day. Coffee's stimulating effects on the central nervous system were seen as the perfect solution to the mental fatigue and exhaustion caused by long hours of work, study, or social engagement. Much like today's coffee culture, the 19th century had its own version of the coffee break. Though back then, it wasn't just a casual pause for socializing. It was seen as a necessary break to refresh the mind and get back to the grind of everyday tasks. But the relationship between coffee and daily life wasn't just about productivity. It also had a social element. Coffee houses were central to the social fabric of the time, and doctors and intellectuals often gathered in these establishments to discuss new ideas, politics, and science, all while sipping their coffee. The famous coffee house culture of the 19th century was a hub for intellectual exchange. Think of it as the 1800s equivalent of the modern-day cafe culture we see today, where coffee shops are still places of study, work, and socializing. In fact, some of the most important intellectual and philosophical discussions of the time took place in coffee houses, with figures such as Charles Darwin and Karl Marx often seen frequenting them. Coffee, in this context, wasn't just about staying awake. It was part of a larger social ritual that helped fuel the intellectual revolutions of the era. And while coffee was fueling discussions about science, art, and politics, it was also fueling a new societal structure, the idea that work and productivity could be enhanced by something as simple as a drink. Historians still argue about how deeply intertwined coffee was with the intellectual progress of the 19th century. Some believe that coffee, by providing the much-needed energy boost, helped spur the productivity of thinkers and writers. Others, however, suggest that the intellectual advancements of the time would have happened regardless of coffee, as they were more a product of the cultural and scientific shifts of the period. Still, there's no denying that coffee played an important role in the social and intellectual life of the time, and that it became a symbol of progress, energy, and focus. But as coffee gained in popularity as a mental stimulant and social elixir, it also became a bit of a double-edged sword. While it was seen as a tool to enhance productivity and focus, it was also seen as a substance that could easily be overconsumed, leading to addiction or nervous disorders. In the 19th century, there was little understanding of the dangers of caffeine addiction, and some people became so reliant on coffee to get through their day that they began to suffer from symptoms of overstimulation, such as jitteriness, anxiety, and even heart palpitations. This growing dependency on coffee was not something doctors overlooked. Some became concerned that their patients were becoming too reliant on caffeine for energy, leading to potential health problems. At the same time, though, coffee's use was still widely accepted as a necessary part of life. The benefits of coffee were still seen as outweighing the potential drawbacks, and coffee remained a beloved beverage in nearly every social and professional setting. Interestingly, some doctors even began prescribing coffee for those who were struggling with addiction to other substances. For instance, coffee was sometimes used to help wean individuals off of alcohol or opium. The idea was that coffee, as a stimulant, could provide a healthier alternative to these substances, helping people manage their cravings and withdrawal symptoms. Of course, we now know that caffeine is far from a perfect substitute for more serious addictions, but it was a widely accepted idea in the 19th century that coffee could play a supportive role in addiction recovery. It's also worth noting that coffee had a significant role in the cultural exchanges of the time. As European colonial powers expanded their reach, coffee cultivation became a major part of the global economy. Coffee plantations were established in the Caribbean, South America, and Southeast Asia, and coffee became a key part of the trade networks that connected Europe to the rest of the world. This international demand for coffee not only fueled the rise of coffee culture in Europe and the Americas, but also shaped the course of history. As the commodity became an integral part of the global economy, as you sit back with your cup of coffee, it's interesting to think about how this simple beverage has evolved from a mere morning ritual to a multifaceted cultural symbol, deeply embedded in both our social lives and our professional routines. Coffee has come a long way from its early days as a medicinal remedy, but its history is a testament to the way human beings have continuously found new ways to use and consume substances in the pursuit of productivity, health, and social connection. Today, coffee is a global phenomenon, enjoyed by millions across the world. Whether it's a morning cup to kickstart the day, an afternoon pick-me-up, or a social occasion at a cafe, coffee is as much a part of our daily routine as it was in the 19th century. The difference now is that we understand more about how caffeine affects our bodies, and we've learned to balance our intake to avoid the negative side effects that doctors once thought coffee could cure. And while coffee may no longer be prescribed for mental exhaustion, pain, or insomnia, it continues to be a source of comfort and connection, just as it was in the days of intellectual coffee houses and 19th century medical prescriptions. As we continue to uncover the many ways 19th century doctors relied on coffee to treat a wide variety of ailments, let's take a closer look at how coffee played a significant role in an area that might seem a little more unexpected: its use in the treatment of sexual health and stamina. Yes, you read that right. Coffee, once thought to cure everything from headaches to exhaustion, was also prescribed for sexual dysfunction and a variety of intimacy-related issues. While modern medicine would have a much different approach to such matters. In the 1800s, doctors believed that coffee could enhance sexual performance, boost libido, and treat impotence. It's one of the more bizarre chapters in coffee's medicinal history. But let's break down why 19th century physicians thought coffee could work its magic in this intimate realm. The use of coffee for sexual health was rooted in the belief that the stimulant properties of caffeine could help invigorate the body in ways that translated into increased sexual energy. Doctors believed that coffee could help revitalize a person's physical vitality, and since sexual activity was seen as an important aspect of overall health, it wasn't too much of a leap to prescribe coffee for intimacy-related concerns. Men who were struggling with fatigue or low energy were often advised to drink coffee to revive their sexual vigor. Women, too, who were experiencing what was termed as sexual frigidity or a lack of sexual desire, were also sometimes recommended to sip on a warm cup of coffee to spark things up. Interestingly, this prescription wasn't solely for individuals who were experiencing sexual dysfunction. Doctors often suggested coffee as a general tonic for improving sexual performance. It was believed that caffeine's stimulating effect on the nervous system could translate into enhanced arousal and better overall stamina. Imagine going to your doctor in the 1800s, explaining that you were feeling a bit lackluster in the bedroom, only to be handed a prescription for a daily dose of coffee. At the time, this didn't seem strange at all. It was simply part of the growing belief that stimulants like coffee could enhance the body's natural energy and vitality. One of the more curious aspects of this practice is that it reflected the broader understanding of the time about how the body and mind were interconnected. Doctors in the 19th century didn't have the modern knowledge of hormones, neurotransmitters, and the complexities of sexual health that we have today. Instead, they relied on what they knew about stimulants and their effects on the body. Coffee, as a central nervous system stimulant, was believed to affect the entire body, including the reproductive system. While we know today that sexual health is far more complex and involves a wide variety of physiological and psychological factors, in the 1800s, the idea that coffee could help with intimacy was just another example of how doctors try to use available substances to address a variety of concerns. Historians still debate how widespread this particular use of coffee really was. Some argue that it was a relatively niche practice, confined to certain medical circles or popularized by certain medical texts. Others suggest that the belief in coffee's ability to enhance sexual vitality was more common, especially among those in the middle and upper classes who could afford regular medical treatments. What's clear, however, is that coffee was seen as an all-encompassing solution for many of the day-to-day challenges that people faced, from mental fatigue to intimacy issues. This practice also highlights how the cultural perceptions of gender and sexuality were very different in the 19th century. Sexual health, particularly for women, was a subject that was often shrouded in mystery, taboo, and social stigma. Women who were experiencing a lack of desire or intimacy were often told that they needed to regain their natural sexual energy, and what better way to revive that energy than with a stimulant like coffee. This prescription for coffee as a sexual enhancer was just one of the many ways that doctors attempted to address the gendered expectations of the time, and it reflected the medical practices that were far from the holistic, evidence-based approaches we use today. Interestingly, the legacy of this thinking continued well into the 20th century, where coffee's connection to sexual health was still tied to ideas of energy and vitality. In fact, coffee was often advertised in the early 1900s as a product that could boost your libido and help you stay active in the bedroom. These marketing strategies were based on the same assumptions about the relationship between coffee, energy, and sexual performance that doctors in the 19th century had used. Although we now understand that sexual health is far more complex, the cultural association between coffee and vitality has persisted in various forms throughout history. But, as with many of coffee's more outlandish medicinal uses, the idea that coffee could directly improve sexual performance eventually fell out of favor as medical science advanced. The development of modern pharmaceuticals and a deeper understanding of human biology led to more effective and targeted treatments for sexual dysfunction. Coffee's role as a stimulant remained, but its connection to sexual health was increasingly seen as a relic of a bygone era. Still, the fact that coffee was once used to treat such a personal, intimate issue speaks to the broader cultural significance of the drink in the 19th century. Coffee was more than just a social drink or a quick fix for fatigue. It was believed to be an elixir for health, vitality, and even one's most private moments. Today, we drink coffee primarily for its ability to wake us up in the morning and provide a quick energy boost. But back then, coffee was much more than that. It was a medicinal miracle, capable of addressing everything from headaches to, believe it or not, sexual stamina. As we sip our coffee today, it's easy to forget the history that surrounds this humble drink. Whether it's in a cafe, an office, or in the comfort of our own homes, coffee remains a central part of our daily routine. But next time you enjoy your cup, take a moment to think about its long and storied past. From being used as a remedy for physical ailments to being prescribed for mental clarity and even sexual health, coffee has been much more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's been a symbol of vitality, energy, and wellness for centuries. We've covered quite a bit of ground, from coffee's role in mental clarity to its use as a weight loss aid and remedy for headaches. But now let's turn our attention to one of coffee's more intriguing and often overlooked roles: its place in the early development of pharmaceutical medicine. In the 19th century, when modern pharmaceutical drugs as we know them today were still in their infancy, coffee was one of the most frequently used substances in medical treatments. And no, it wasn't just for keeping you awake during those long office hours or while attending endless social events. Coffee was seen as a legitimate ingredient in medicinal tonics and potions used to treat everything from fatigue to chronic illness. It's hard to imagine, in today's world of scientifically developed, FDA-approved medications, that coffee would be viewed as a cornerstone in the world of medicine. But back in the 19th century, doctors didn't have the extensive pharmaceutical options we have today. Many medicines were composed of simple, natural ingredients, and coffee already known for its stimulating and energy-boosting properties, found its way into these concoctions. Often, coffee was mixed with various other herbs, minerals, and even alcohol to create tonics or elixirs believed to treat a range of conditions. One of the most common ways coffee was used in medicinal concoctions was in treatments for what was known as nervous disorders. In an age where medical science was still learning about the complexities of the nervous system, coffee was thought to be a good option for patients who were experiencing exhaustion, mental strain, or nervousness. The theory was that coffee, with its stimulating effects on the central nervous system, could help restore energy levels and give a much-needed jolt to the body and mind. For those who were mentally fatigued or suffering from anxiety, a coffee-based remedy was believed to help calm the nerves and restore mental clarity. Coffee's inclusion in medicinal tonics wasn't limited to just nervous disorders, though it was also commonly used in cough syrups and other respiratory treatments. The reason? Well, coffee was believed to be a natural bronchodilator, a substance that could help open up the airways and improve breathing. While we know today that there are far more effective and safer treatments for respiratory issues, the inclusion of coffee in these concoctions was based on the idea that it could help clear the lungs and make breathing easier. Doctors believed that coffee's stimulating effect could help increase circulation, which would, in turn, benefit the respiratory system by delivering more oxygen to the body's tissues. Additionally, coffee was often combined with other herbal remedies like ginger, mint, or licorice to create all-purpose tonics designed to boost the immune system and promote overall health. The practice of mixing coffee with herbs and spices was part of a larger trend in 19th century medicine, combining the benefits of various natural ingredients to create miracle cures. These so-called miracle tonics, many of which contained coffee, were marketed widely to the public, promising everything from increased vitality to the ability to cure chronic illnesses. But as you might expect, while some of these remedies did offer short-term benefits, the long-term results were much less clear. Coffee might give you a temporary energy boost, but it didn't actually heal the underlying problems. In fact, many of the tonics and elixirs that included coffee as an ingredient were more about creating a comforting, energizing experience than they were about providing real medicinal benefits. And yet, in an era where medical knowledge was still developing, these cures were often the best options available. One of the most famous products that utilized coffee in its formula was a concoction called Dr. Miles's Nervine. This was a widely used remedy in the late 1800s, and it contained coffee as one of its main ingredients. Marketed as a solution for calming the nerves and relieving tension, Dr. Miles's Nervine was just one example of how coffee was incorporated into the world of early pharmaceutical medicine. The product was widely popular and, like many of its counterparts, was believed to offer a safe and natural way to treat a range of conditions. Interestingly, some of the ingredients that were once combined with coffee in these early remedies have survived in modern medicine. The use of herbal supplements tinctures, and even some forms of natural medicine can trace their roots back to the 19th century, even if the specific combination of coffee and herbs has mostly faded from popular use. Coffee, with its long-standing association with energy and vitality, has had a lasting influence on the way we think about health, wellness, and energy today. Despite its widespread use in these early medicinal products, coffee's role in pharmaceutical medicine began to decline as modern science advanced. As we moved into the 20th century, more effective, scientifically tested drugs became available, and the use of coffee as a medicinal ingredient began to fall out of favor. Coffee was no longer seen as a cure-all, but remained a popular beverage and part of modern coffee culture. Still, the fact that coffee played such an important role in the development of early pharmaceuticals speaks to the ingenuity and creativity of 19th century doctors who did their best to treat their patients with the limited knowledge and resources they had. Today, we no longer rely on coffee as a key ingredient in medications, but its place in history remains significant. We still reach for that cup of coffee when we need a pick-me-up or a moment of comfort, and many people still swear by its ability to provide a burst of energy. But while the days of using coffee as a primary treatment for illness have passed, the drink remains deeply woven into our cultural and medical history. Next time you enjoy a cup of coffee, you can appreciate not only the flavor and the caffeine boost, but also the incredible history behind the drink. From its days as a remedy for mental fatigue to its use in early medicinal tonics, coffee has played a key role in shaping the course of medicine and wellness throughout history. It's a reminder that even the simplest things can carry rich histories, full of surprising uses and cultural significance. As we approach the final chapters of our exploration into the peculiar medical history of coffee, let's take a moment to reflect on how coffee's role in the 19th century intersected with broader cultural and social trends. Coffee, while being widely used as a medicinal remedy for nearly every ailment imaginable, also became a symbol of progress and modernity. The 19th century was a time of great change, marked by industrialization, scientific advancements, and an increasing interest in public health. Coffee, often marketed as a vital and energizing substance, fit neatly into the narrative of a fast-paced, ever-evolving society. In a world that was waking up to new possibilities, coffee wasn't just something to drink, it was something that embodied the spirit of the age. In the 1800s, coffee was more than just a beverage. It was seen as a sign of sophistication and modernity. This was the era of coffee houses, which became the gathering places for the intellectuals, artists, and thinkers of the time. These establishments were not only places to get your caffeine fix, they were hubs for the exchange of ideas and conversation. Coffee houses played a critical role in the development of early social movements, from political debates to scientific discussions. In many ways, coffee was the drink of progress, fueling the minds that were reshaping the world. The 19th century saw the birth of some of the most important political and philosophical movements in history. And coffee was there, providing the energy to sustain those long, passionate discussions. At the same time, coffee became a symbol of the expanding global economy. The coffee trade was an integral part of the rise of colonialism, with coffee plantations being established in regions such as South America, Africa, and Asia. As demand for coffee grew, so did the global networks that supported its cultivation and distribution. Coffee became one of the most valuable commodities in the world, driving trade routes and shaping the global economy. And just as it fueled the minds of intellectuals in Europe, it also fueled the workforce on plantations in far-off lands. The global reach of coffee during the 19th century reflected the rapid expansion of European influence across the globe. But beyond its connection to the intellectual and economic spheres, coffee also had a deep connection to the domestic lives of everyday people. In the 19th century, the growing availability and affordability of coffee made it accessible to the masses. While coffee had once been a luxury item reserved for the elite, it was now something that could be found in nearly every home. Coffee became an integral part of the daily routine, from breakfast tables to mid-afternoon breaks. For many, it wasn't just a drink, it was a ritual, a comforting and familiar presence in their lives. The idea of the coffee break became a cultural norm, a brief pause in the busy day to recharge and refocus. What's particularly interesting is how the consumption of coffee changed during this period. While coffee had once been enjoyed primarily as a beverage for relaxation and socialization, by the 19th century, it had become more than that. It was a symbol of productivity and energy. Coffee was no longer just for leisurely conversation, it was for work. In fact, many doctors and health experts of the time began to recommend coffee as a necessary part of a productive lifestyle. Coffee was seen as a tool for enhancing focus, keeping people awake, and enabling them to power through long hours of work. As industrialization spread, people worked longer hours, and coffee became an essential part of the workday, helping to keep the workforce energized and alert. Despite the widespread belief in the benefits of coffee during the 19th century, it wasn't without its critics. Some doctors and public health officials raised concerns about the overconsumption of caffeine and the potential negative effects on health. The widespread use of coffee in medicine was often met with skepticism by certain groups who feared that it could lead to addiction or other health problems. While coffee had its devotees, there were also those who warned against excessive use, believing that it could lead to nervous disorders, digestive issues, and even heart problems. The growing popularity of coffee as a daily ritual led to debates about its place in modern society, with some arguing that it was necessary for progress and others questioning its long-term effects on public health. Despite these concerns, coffee's popularity only continued to rise throughout the 19th century. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, from the rural working class to the intellectual elites. Coffee houses became places where ideas were exchanged, businesses were conducted, and social movements took root. At the same time, coffee was becoming a global commodity, tied to the forces of imperialism and the expanding global economy. Whether you were drinking it to stay awake for a late night study session, trying to ease a headache, or simply enjoying a cup with friends, coffee had become a ubiquitous part of the 19th century experience. Today, coffee remains as popular as ever. It has evolved from a medical remedy to a global cultural phenomenon, with millions of people around the world relying on it to kickstart their day, stay productive, or simply relax. While we no longer prescribe it for ailments like insomnia or headaches, coffee continues to play an important role in our daily lives. It's a beverage that has weathered centuries of change, from its early days as a mysterious and exotic drink to its place as a global staple. The enduring legacy of coffee is a testament to its cultural significance and its role in shaping the modern world. So, as you sip your next cup of coffee, remember that this humble drink has a history that stretches back centuries. From its medicinal uses in the 19th century to its current place in our daily routines, coffee has been a constant companion, helping to fuel the minds and bodies of people across the world. It's a drink that has transcended time and culture, always adapting to the needs of the people who drink it. Whether it's for energy, comfort, or even a little bit of nostalgia, coffee remains an essential part of our lives, and its history, rich with curious and surprising uses, is a reminder of how something as simple as a cup of coffee can be woven into the fabric of human culture and history. As we approach the final stretch of our journey through coffee's 19th century medicinal history, let's take a moment to reflect on the lasting legacy of coffee as a social and cultural institution. Over the centuries, coffee has evolved from a magical elixir used to cure various ailments to the beverage we know and love today, an essential part of daily life for millions of people around the world. But even as we shift from a medicinal to a social beverage, coffee continues to be at the heart of cultural rituals and practices. From the intellectual coffee houses of the 1800s to today's global coffee culture, the drink has always had a powerful social function. In the 19th century, coffee houses were not just places to grab a cup of java. They were social hubs where people gathered to exchange ideas, debate politics, and discuss the future of society. This wasn't just for the intellectual elite. Coffee houses were frequented by people from all walks of life, from businessmen to artists to revolutionaries. The coffee house culture played a significant role in shaping intellectual discourse, and many important historical events and ideas were born over cups of coffee. During this period, coffee houses became synonymous with the intellectual life of the time. Figures such as Karl Marx and Charles Darwin were known to frequent coffee houses, using these spaces as venues for their revolutionary ideas and scientific discussions. Coffee, in this sense, wasn't just a stimulant to keep people awake. It was also a symbol of enlightenment and intellectual progress. The coffee house was a place where ideas were exchanged, where people from different backgrounds could come together to shape the future of politics, science, and culture. In fact, the coffee house culture played a key role in the development of democracy and political movements in the 19th century. As more people began to gather in these public spaces, they were able to share their ideas and opinions freely, which was a crucial step in the growth of democratic societies. In many ways, the coffee house became the birthplace of modern political thought and social change. It was in these spaces that discussions about human rights, freedom, and equality were fostered, and movements like the suffragette movement and the rise of labor unions gained momentum. The coffee house, with its casual atmosphere and open discourse, provided a platform for ordinary people to engage in the political process and influence the course of history. While the 19th century saw coffee houses as centers of intellectual exchange, the role of coffee as a social ritual has only grown stronger in the 20th and 21st centuries. Today, coffee is synonymous with socializing. Whether it's a casual chat with a friend, a business meeting, or a first date, coffee has become a universal symbol of connection. The rise of coffee shops, think Starbucks, local cafes, or artisanal roasters, has cemented coffee's place as a cultural institution. It's no longer just about getting a caffeine fix. It's about the experience of sitting down, chatting with others, and sharing a moment over a cup of coffee. Interestingly, the 19th century perception of coffee as a symbol of productivity and energy still resonates today. In our fast-paced modern lives, we often turn to coffee to fuel our daily routines, whether it's for work, study, or a quick break. Coffee remains a crucial part of our productivity culture. The fact that we still rely on coffee to power us through our day speaks to its enduring influence on modern society. Even though we no longer use it for medicinal purposes, coffee continues to serve as a vital tool for staying alert, focused, and energized. But beyond productivity, coffee has maintained its role as a symbol of connection and community. Just as coffee houses in the 19th century brought people together to exchange ideas, modern coffee culture thrives on social interaction. Coffee shops have become meeting places where people gather, not only for their caffeine fix, but to engage with one another, share experiences, and form relationships. This social aspect of coffee drinking is one of the key reasons why it remains such a beloved beverage around the world. Interestingly, coffee's role in socialization extends beyond the coffee house and cafe culture. In many cultures, coffee plays a central role in family gatherings, celebrations, and even religious rituals. For example, in Ethiopia, the birthplace of coffee, the traditional coffee ceremony is an important cultural practice that brings family and friends together to celebrate the coffee growing tradition. In the Middle East, coffee is often served as a gesture of hospitality, a way to welcome guests and foster meaningful conversations. Coffee, in these contexts, is not just a drink. It's a symbol of warmth, connection, and shared humanity. As we reflect on the journey of coffee from its early days as a medicinal remedy to its current place as a social and cultural institution, it's clear that this humble beverage has played a significant role in shaping human culture. Coffee has been a source of comfort, energy, and connection for centuries. and its influence on society continues to be felt today. In the 19th century, coffee was seen as a cure-all, a remedy for everything from mental fatigue to pain, from weight loss to sexual health. But beyond its medicinal uses, coffee became a symbol of progress, socialization, and intellectual exchange. The coffee houses of the 1800s were the birthplace of ideas that shaped the course of history, and coffee, as both a social drink and a symbol of productivity, has remained a part of the human experience ever since. From fueling the minds of revolutionaries to connecting people across the world, coffee's place in our lives has only grown more significant. So, as you sit with your cup of coffee today, take a moment to appreciate its rich history, from its early medicinal uses to its central role in shaping intellectual and social life. Coffee is much more than just a beverage. It's a part of the story of human progress, connection, and culture. And as you sip, remember that you're participating in a long and storied tradition that stretches back centuries, a tradition that continues to thrive in coffee houses, cafes, and homes across the globe. As we reach the final chapter of our exploration into the fascinating and often surprising history of coffee in the 19th century, let's take a moment to reflect on how the use of coffee has shaped modern society and how its legacy continues to resonate in the present day. From its early days as a medicinal remedy to its role as a symbol of social connection, productivity, and intellectual exchange, coffee's history has been deeply intertwined with the development of human culture. But how does this all connect to today's global coffee culture? Let's take one last look at coffee's evolution and its enduring place in our lives. In the 19th century, coffee was seen as much more than a simple drink. It was a remedy, a social lubricant, and a symbol of the modern age. From doctors prescribing coffee for everything from mental exhaustion to childbirth, to the bustling coffee houses where the intellectuals of the day gathered to discuss ideas, coffee was a tool for both personal health and social interaction. It was woven into the fabric of daily life, and its role in the 19th century laid the groundwork for its place in our contemporary culture. Today, coffee is no longer used as a medical treatment, but it has become even more central to our daily routines. Think about how many people around the world rely on coffee to start their day, stay productive, or take a break from their busy schedules. Coffee is often one of the first things we reach for in the morning, and in many cultures, it's an integral part of the social fabric. Whether it's a coffee break at work, a casual coffee date with friends, or a quiet moment with a cup of coffee at home, it remains a beverage of connection, comfort, and community. Interestingly, the rise of coffee shops and cafes in the modern world has created a new space for coffee to fulfill its social role. The coffee house, say, once the domain of intellectuals and revolutionaries, has become a global phenomenon. In cities all over the world, coffee shops serve as meeting places where people come together to work, socialize, or simply enjoy a cup of coffee. Much like the 19th century coffee houses, modern cafes are spaces for dialogue, creativity, and connection, where ideas are exchanged and friendships are formed. The social aspect of coffee is perhaps its most enduring legacy, reminding us that coffee has always been about more than just the beverage itself. It's about the experience it fosters. Yet, despite coffee's social importance, we can't overlook its ongoing role as a source of productivity and energy. The stimulant properties of caffeine have kept people awake, alert, and focused for centuries. In the modern world, coffee continues to be a vital part of work culture. Whether it's powering through a long meeting, staying focused during a study session, or simply pushing through the day's tasks, coffee remains a go-to source of energy. Its role in productivity hasn't changed much from the 19th century. Coffee is still the drink that helps us get things done. As our understanding of health and wellness has evolved, so too has the conversation surrounding coffee. Today, we know that coffee can have both positive and negative effects on our health, depending on how much we consume and when. Moderate coffee consumption has been linked to a variety of health benefits, including improved cognitive function, reduced risk of certain diseases, and a lower risk of mental decline as we age. However, excessive caffeine intake can lead to anxiety, disrupted sleep, and other health issues. The key, as with many things in life, is moderation. Despite the growing awareness of coffee's potential downsides, the love for coffee has only intensified. In fact, the global coffee industry is now a multi-billion-dollar industry, with countless varieties of coffee beans, brewing methods, and specialty drinks available to suit every taste. From espresso to cold brew, coffee has become a versatile drink that can be enjoyed in a multitude of ways. Coffee culture has expanded beyond just a morning routine. It's a lifestyle. People are now exploring the nuances of coffee beans, learning about the origins of their favorite brews, and enjoying the experience of tasting coffee as one would wine. But as much as coffee has changed and adapted over the years, one thing remains the same. It still serves as a catalyst for connection, conversation, and creativity. Coffee continues to bring people together, whether it's in a bustling cafe or a quiet corner of a home. It still sparks ideas, fuels productivity, and offers a brief moment of respite in an often chaotic world. In this sense, the legacy of the 19th century coffee houses, those hubs of intellectual exchange, lives on in the modern coffee culture. As we finish this journey through coffee's rich history, it's clear that this humble beverage has been much more than just a drink. It has been a symbol of social progress, a tool for productivity, and a remedy for many of life's challenges. While we no longer use it for medicinal purposes, coffee's role in our daily lives is still deeply rooted in its history. It has evolved, but its cultural significance remains unchanged. And as we sip our morning coffee or share a cup with friends, we are continuing a centuries-old tradition that has shaped human society in ways both big and small. So, next time you enjoy your cup of coffee, take a moment to appreciate the rich history that it represents. From the 19th century doctors who saw it as a cure-all to the intellectuals who sipped it in bustling coffee houses, to the modern coffee culture that surrounds us today, coffee has been and continues to be a key player in shaping the way we live, work, and connect with each other.